The porch light flickered as I fumbled with my keys, my arthritic fingers struggling with the lock. It was past midnight. I knew that much from the ache in my bones and the way the street had gone silent except for the distant hum of the interstate. At 72 years old, I'd learned to read time by the weight of darkness. The door swung open before I could turn the key. "Can't you see the time, idiot? Get to the kitchen." The slap came fast, not hard enough to truly hurt, but sharp enough to sting both my cheek and my heart. My daughter Sarah stood in the doorway, her face twisted with something between fury and desperation, her hand still raised from the strike. I stood frozen on my own doorstep, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. This was the same little girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during late-night fishing trips, who'd called me her hero when I scared away the monsters under her bed. Now she was 43, and I barely recognized the woman glaring at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Sarah, don't," her voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what you've put us through tonight?" I stepped inside, my worn work boots heavy on the hardwood floor. I'd installed myself 30 years ago. The house smelled like burnt coffee and anxiety. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I saw them all gathered in the living room like some kind of intervention. My son-in-law Marcus on the couch, his face gray with exhaustion. My grandson Tyler, 17, staring at his phone with tears streaming down his face. And my granddaughter Emma, just 14, curled up in my old recliner, her eyes wide and frightened. "What's going on?" I asked, though a cold dread was already settling in my stomach. Sarah's laugh was bitter. "What's going on? What's going on?" Her voice rose to a near shriek. "You've been missing for 6 hours, Dad. 6 hours. We called everyone, the police, the hospitals, your friends from the VFW. Marcus has been driving around the city looking for you. We thought you were dead in a ditch somewhere." The words hit me like physical blows. "Missing 6 hours. I was just at the hardware store," I said slowly, reaching into my jacket pocket. "I needed to get some supplies for fixing Emma's bookshelf. See, I have the receipt right." My pocket was empty. "What hardware store, Frank?" Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice gentle but strained. "Miller's Hardware closed 3 years ago. You remember that, don't you? We all went to the going out of business sale together." The room tilted slightly. I gripped the doorframe. "No, I was just there. Old Pete was behind the counter. We talked about the Broncos game, and he helped me find the right wood screws," and I trailed off, seeing the look that passed between Sarah and Marcus. It was the same look people gave my father in his final years, full of pity and fear and unbearable sadness. "Dad," Sarah's voice was softer now, though tears were running down her cheeks. "Pete Millison died last year. You went to his funeral. You gave a eulogy." The world seemed to contract around me. I had a sudden, vivid memory of standing at Pete's graveside, talking about our 40 years of friendship, about the time he'd helped me build Sarah's swing set, about how he'd always saved me the best pieces of lumber. "I remember the funeral," I whispered. "I remember." "Then where were you tonight?" Tyler spoke up, his young voice trembling. "Grandpa, I tracked your phone. You were just wandering all over town. You walked past our house 3 times and didn't even stop." I had no answer. The evening was a blur of streetlights and sidewalks, of familiar places that seemed strange, of purpose without destination. I remembered walking, always walking, searching for something I couldn't name. Sarah's slap suddenly made terrible sense. It wasn't anger, it was terror. Terror that the father who'd raised her, who'd read her bedtime stories and taught her to ride a bike and walked her down the aisle, was slipping away into some fog she couldn't penetrate. "I'm sorry," I said, the words completely inadequate. "I didn't mean to worry you all." "That's what you said last month," Emma spoke up from the recliner, her voice small. "When you forgot you were supposed to pick me up from soccer practice, and last week when you called Mom by Grandma's name for a whole hour." Sarah sank into a chair, her face in her hands. "I can't do this alone anymore, Dad. I just can't. I have a job, 2 kids, and I'm trying to take care of you, but you won't admit there's a problem. You won't see a doctor. You won't let us help." "Because I'm fine," the words came out sharper than I intended. I'm 72, not 92. I drove a forklift for 40 years without a single accident. I served in Vietnam. I raised you by myself after your mother died. I don't need. You drove through a red light last week. Sarah's head snapped up. Mrs. Chen saw you. You nearly hit a school bus. A school bus, Dad. I had no memory of that. None at all. The silence that followed was suffocating. The grandfather clock in the corner, a wedding gift from my late wife Clara, ticked away the seconds of this awful moment. I'd wound that clock every Sunday for 47 years. Last Sunday, Marcus had found me standing in front of it at 3 a.m., insisting I needed to wind it, though I'd already done it twice that day. Get to the kitchen, Sarah said finally, her voice hollow. There's someone who wants to talk to you. I walked through the dining room, past the table where we'd shared thousands of meals, past the walls covered in family photos documenting a life I'd built from nothing. In the kitchen, a woman I'd never seen before sat at the table with a folder in front of her. Mr. Morrison, I'm Dr. Patricia Reeves. I specialize in geriatric cognitive health. She gestured to the chair across from her. Your daughter asked me to come by. I know this is unexpected, but I'd like to talk to you about some concerns your family has raised. I looked back toward the living room, where my family sat in various states of distress. This was an ambush, well-intentioned perhaps, but an ambush nonetheless. Part of me wanted to storm out, to assert my independence, to reject this intrusion into my life. But Emma was crying silently now, and Tyler had his arm around her. Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years in one night, and Sarah, my strong, capable daughter who'd become a force of nature in her own right, looked broken. I sat down. Dr. Reeves opened her folder. Your daughter tells me you've been having some memory difficulties, confusion about time and place, trouble with familiar tasks. I'd like to ask you some questions, if that's all right. What day is it? She asked gently. I started to answer, then stopped. Was it Tuesday, Wednesday? It's the middle of the week. What month? March, I was certain of that. Or was it April? The uncertainty made my chest tight. Can you tell me who the current president is? I knew this, of course I knew this, but the name hovered just out of reach, like trying to catch smoke. Give me a second. The questions continued, each one revealing another gap in what should have been simple knowledge. She showed me pictures, asked me to remember words, had me draw a clock face. By the time she finished, I felt exhausted and small. Mr. Morrison, Frank, I can't make a definitive diagnosis tonight, but based on what your family has described and what I'm seeing, I believe you're experiencing symptoms consistent with early-stage dementia, possibly Alzheimer's disease. We'd need to do a full neurological workup to be certain, but... No, I stood up. Absolutely not. I'm just tired. I'm getting older. Everyone forgets things sometimes. Not like this, Dad. Sarah had appeared in the doorway. Her earlier anger had evaporated, leaving only sadness. Not wandering the streets for hours, not forgetting that your best friend died, not nearly causing accidents. I won't let you put me in some home, I said, my voice shaking. I won't be warehoused like my father was, sitting in front of a TV, drooling, not knowing my own name. Nobody's talking about that. Sarah crossed the room and grabbed my hands. Dad, we're talking about getting you help, about understanding what's happening so we can deal with it together, but you have to admit there's a problem first. I looked into my daughter's eyes, the same blue-gray Clara had loved, and saw my own fear reflected back at me, because the truth was I knew, somewhere deep down, past all the denial and pride, I knew something was terribly wrong. The gaps in my memory were growing. The confusion was becoming more frequent. Sometimes I'd find myself in a room with no idea how I got there or what I was looking for. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm so scared, Sarah. She pulled me into a hug, and I felt her whole body shaking with sobs. I know, Daddy, I know, but we're going to fight this together, all of us. The rest of the family had gathered in the kitchen doorway. Emma launched herself at me, wrapping her arms around my waist. Tyler joined in, then Marcus. We stood there in a huddle, this family I'd helped create, holding each other against an uncertain future. "I'm sorry I slapped you," Sarah said into my shoulder. "I was just so terrified, I thought I'd lost you." "You haven't lost me yet," I said, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. Parts of me were already disappearing, memories dissolving like morning fog. "And I'm sorry I scared you all, I never meant to." Dr. Reeves stood quietly, giving us our moment. When we finally separated, she laid out a plan: appointments with specialists, tests to determine the extent and type of cognitive decline, strategies for managing symptoms, resources for the family. "This isn't a death sentence," she said. "It's a diagnosis, and with proper care, support, and possibly medication, we can slow the progression and maintain quality of life for years to come. But it requires everyone working together, including you, Frank." I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. That night, Sarah insisted I stay in the guest room rather than drive home. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed, I could hear muted voices downstairs, my family planning, worrying, adjusting to this new reality. I thought about all the things I might forget: Clara's laugh, the smell of Emma's baby shampoo, the pride I felt watching Sarah graduate college, the weight of Tyler in my arms when he was born. But I also thought about what I still had: a family that loved me enough to fight, to search for me in the dark, to slap me awake when I was sleepwalking through danger. A family that wouldn't let me face this alone. The slap had strung, but maybe I'd needed it, not the physical blow, but the wake-up call it represented. I'd been living in denial, letting pride and fear prevent me from getting help, putting myself and others at risk. Tomorrow I would start fighting back, not against my family's help, but against this disease that was trying to steal my memories, my independence, myself. I would go to the doctors, take the tests, follow the treatment plans. I would write things down, use calendars and reminders, accept help when I needed it. And most importantly, I would make new memories while I still could. Memories of facing this challenge with grace and courage. Memories of a family that refused to give up on each other. The journey ahead would be hard. There would be more confusion, more fear, more moments of loss. But there would also be love, support, and the determination to make every remaining moment count. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I heard Emma's voice from downstairs. "Is Grandpa going to be okay?" And Sarah's response, firm and fierce, "We're going to make sure he is." That promise would have to be enough.